My name is Heather Morrison, and at 32, I thought loyalty to my company meant something. For 7 years, I poured my heart into Lawrence Financial, bringing in millions for Brandon Lawrence, the man who once called me his most valuable asset. That changed the day he theatrically shredded my contract in front of the entire board, declaring my loyalty worthless. What he never anticipated was the single piece of paper my lawyer would slide across the table 1 week later, turning his smug smile into pure panic. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated in your career. Trust me, what happens next in this story will make it worth your while. I joined Lawrence Financial straight out of business school with a marketing degree and big dreams. Brandon Lawrence, the founder and CEO, had built his company from nothing into a respectable mid-sized financial services firm over 20 years. When I first interviewed with him, I was captivated by his vision and charisma. He spoke about integrity, client relationships, and building something that would last generations. I wanted to be part of that legacy. My role began in client relations, where I quickly showed an aptitude for connecting with our high-net-worth clients. Many of these people had entrusted their family fortunes and business finances to Brandon for years. I learned the business from the ground up, staying late to study financial reports, market trends, and client portfolios. Brandon noticed my dedication and began mentoring me, or so I thought at the time. "Heather, you remind me of myself when I was younger," he would say. "Hungry, smart, willing to do whatever it takes." By my 3rd year, I had been promoted to senior client manager, handling some of our most valuable accounts. The crown jewel of Lawrence Financial was Westbrook Industries, a manufacturing conglomerate worth over $300 million. The founder, Thomas Westbrook, was Brandon's first major client 20 years ago. Their relationship had grown beyond business into a close friendship. Everyone knew that Westbrook Industries represented nearly 30% of our firm's annual revenue. When Thomas Westbrook's health began declining 5 years ago, his daughter Katherine took over operations. Katherine was brilliant, having earned her MBA from Wharton and worked at several Fortune 500 companies before returning to the family business. At 40, she was determined to modernize her father's company while honoring his legacy. Brandon initially assigned himself to the Westbrook account transition, but scheduling conflicts led him to reluctantly bring me into several meetings. Katherine and I connected immediately. We were both women trying to prove ourselves in male-dominated industries, both respectful of tradition but eager to innovate. While Brandon spoke to her about her father's old strategies, I prepared presentations about new market opportunities and digital transformation. After 3 successful quarters working together, Katherine specifically requested me as her primary contact at Lawrence Financial. Brandon was visibly displeased but acquiesced, recognizing Katherine's importance to the firm. He pulled me aside afterward. "Remember, Heather, the Westbrook account belongs to Lawrence Financial, not to you personally. Everything you do with them represents me and my company." I nodded professionally, though his possessiveness struck me as odd. "Of course, Brandon. I understand completely." Over the next 2 years, I helped Katherine navigate a major acquisition, streamline their financial operations, and increase their profit margins by 17%. We developed a close professional relationship, often meeting for coffee outside of formal business settings to discuss ideas. I always kept Brandon informed of our strategies and progress. The office dynamics at Lawrence Financial were increasingly complicated during this time. We had grown to nearly 50 employees with 4 senior partners below Brandon, all men who had been with him for over a decade. Despite my success with clients, I remained outside this inner circle. My direct supervisor, Vincent Parker, seemed particularly resentful of my rising profile. Vincent was Brandon's college roommate and held the title of Chief Operating Officer, though his actual contributions to the company were questionable at best. He took credit for others' work and spent more time on the golf course than in the office. "The boys' club runs deep around here," warned Diane from accounting during a rare happy hour I attended. "Brandon talks about meritocracy, but watch who gets promoted." She nodded toward a group of men laughing with Brandon across the bar. 7 years, no female senior partners. Think about it. I dismissed her concerns at the time. My performance metrics were exceptional, and Brandon had hinted at a partnership track during my last review. I believed if I just worked hard enough, results would speak for themselves. The contract I signed in my 5th year included profit sharing and a guaranteed bonus structure based on client retention and growth. It was a step toward partnership, Brandon explained, a way to reward my loyalty and success. I was ecstatic, seeing it as confirmation that meritocracy truly did matter at Lawrence Financial. What I failed to notice were the warning signs. The way Brandon grew increasingly curious about my meetings with Katherine Westbrook, how he began asking for detailed notes after every interaction, the subtle ways he tried to insert himself back into the relationship, the new clause in my contract, giving the company ownership of all client relationships I developed. I was too focused on performance, too trusting in the system. When Brandon announced a special board meeting to discuss strategic restructuring, I actually believed it might include my partnership announcement. After all, I had just closed a quarter with the highest client growth numbers in company history. The Westbrook account alone had increased their investments with us by 22%. How wrong I was. The first real indication something was wrong came 3 months before the contract shredding incident. Brandon hired Michael Donovan, a financial advisor from a larger competitor, without the usual interview process. Michael was in his 40s with an impressive resume and the kind of polished confidence that comes from old money connections. Michael brings in valuable experience and relationships to our firm, Brandon announced during the Monday morning meeting. He will be taking on some of our key accounts to help us provide even better service. I noticed Vincent smirking as Brandon spoke. Something felt off, but I smiled professionally and welcomed Michael to the team. After the meeting, Brandon asked me to share all my files on several major clients, including some preliminary notes on Westbrook Industries. Just for Michael's background, he explained casually, so he understands our approach with top-tier clients. That afternoon, I saw Michael in Brandon's office, both of them laughing and looking at what appeared to be my presentation for Katherine's upcoming project. When I entered with the quarterly reports Brandon had requested, they quickly changed the computer screen. "Just showing Michael the ropes," Brandon said, dismissing me with a nod. The following week, I was surprised to find Michael had been added to an important meeting with Katherine Westbrook. Brandon introduced him as our new senior advisor who will be supporting the Westbrook relationship. Katherine glanced at me with a raised eyebrow but remained professionally cordial. After the meeting, she pulled me aside. "Is something changing with our arrangement, Heather? I specifically requested you as my advisor." "Not that I know of," I assured her. "Michael is new, and Brandon is probably just getting him acquainted with our major clients." Katherine seemed unconvinced. "I have worked with enough financial firms to recognize when accounts are being transferred. If that is happening, I would appreciate transparency." I promised to get clarity and immediately scheduled a meeting with Brandon. He kept rescheduling until finally agreeing to a brief conversation between his other appointments. "Katherine seems concerned about Michael's involvement," I said directly. "Is there a plan to transition the Westbrook account?" Brandon looked annoyed. "Client relationships belong to the firm, Heather. Michael has experience with manufacturing conglomerates that could benefit Westbrook. I am simply leveraging all our resources for our most valuable client." "Of course," I replied carefully. "I just want to ensure we are coordinating our communications so Katherine feels her needs are being prioritized." His expression softened slightly. "You have done excellent work with Westbrook. Nobody is taking that away from you. But as we grow, we need to institutionalize these relationships. Katherine needs to see Lawrence Financial as her partner, not just Heather Morrison." The explanation made some business sense, but something in his tone left me uneasy. Over the next few weeks, I noticed other troubling patterns. My access to certain client files was restricted. Michael was copied on all my Westbrook communications. Brandon began scheduling meetings with Katherine that excluded me. My friend Natalie, from the legal department, noticed my concern during lunch. "Everything okay? You seem distracted." I hesitated before confiding in her. "I think I might be getting sidelined from my biggest account. Brandon has been acting strangely about Westbrook Industries." Natalie put down her fork. "The rumor mill says Brandon is trying to bring in another major investor, some private equity group that wants certain guarantees about client management." "What kind of guarantees?" "The kind that might make individual relationship managers seem like a liability rather than an asset." She lowered her voice. "Start documenting everything, Heather. Every email, every meeting, every decision. Forward work emails to your personal account." "That seems extreme," I protested. "Brandon has always been fair to me." Natalie gave me a pointed look. "Fair when it served him. Just protect yourself. Okay, make copies of your contract and performance reviews." That night I reviewed my contract carefully for the first time since signing it. The language about client relationships belonging to the firm was stronger than I remembered. However, there were also clear provisions about my compensation structure and termination procedures that required proper notice and severance under specific conditions. 2 weeks later, Brandon called me into his office late on a Friday. Michael was already there reviewing what looked like the Westbrook file. Katherine called, Brandon said without preamble. She wants to discuss potentially consolidating some of her external investments into our management. My face lit up. That is great news. I have been discussing diversification strategies with her for months. Yes, well, Michael and I will handle the meeting on Monday. It is high-level discussion about structure. Should I prepare the usual portfolio analysis? I asked, trying to hide my confusion. Brandon and Michael exchanged glances. Not necessary, Brandon replied. We have it covered. As I turned to leave, Brandon added, Oh, and the board meeting has been moved up to next Thursday. Make sure you are prepared to present the quarterly client retention figures. I spent the weekend feeling increasingly anxious. On Monday morning, I arrived early to find Katherine waiting in our lobby. She seemed surprised to see me. I thought our meeting was at 9, she said. I believe Brandon and Michael are handling your meeting today, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Katherine frowned. I specifically requested you. My assistant confirmed with your office on Friday. Before I could respond, Brandon emerged from his office all smiles. Katherine, wonderful to see you. We are all set up in the conference room. I was just telling Heather I requested her for this meeting, Katherine said firmly. Brandon barely missed a beat. Of course Heather will join us. I just thought with the complexity of what you are considering, having our senior team would be beneficial. The meeting was tense. Katherine directed most of her questions to me while Brandon repeatedly intercepted, deferring complex matters to Michael. Afterward, Katherine asked me to walk her out. What is going on, Heather? She asked once we were alone in the elevator. I honestly do not know, I admitted. There seems to be some reorganization happening. She handed me her business card. Call me this week. My personal cell is on the back. That evening, I received an email from Brandon, criticizing my unprofessional attempt to monopolize client attention during the meeting. The board meeting was now scheduled for Wednesday instead of Thursday, with no explanation for the change. Something was definitely wrong, and I was running out of time to figure out what. Wednesday arrived with an atmosphere of tension throughout the office. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon, but Brandon had been behind closed doors with the board members and Michael since morning. Nobody would meet my eyes as I walked through the office. Even Natalie seemed to be avoiding me. At 1:45, Brandon's assistant Julia appeared at my desk. They are ready for you in the boardroom. I thought the meeting started at 2. She shrugged apologetically. They asked for you now. The boardroom was our most impressive space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a massive mahogany table that could seat 20. Today, only 9 people occupied it. Brandon at the head, the 4 board members on either side, and Michael seated conspicuously at Brandon's right hand. The chair at the opposite end remained empty, clearly intended for me. Heather, thank you for joining us, Brandon said, his voice carrying none of the warmth I had once associated with him. We have been reviewing the company's strategic direction. I took my seat, placing my presentation materials on the table. I have prepared the quarterly client retention figures as requested. That will not be necessary, Brandon said, sliding a folder toward me. We have a more pressing matter to discuss. Inside the folder was a copy of my contract with certain clauses highlighted, including those pertaining to client relationships and confidentiality. The board has concerns about your recent performance and adherence to company policies, Brandon continued, specifically regarding your handling of the Westbrook account. I stared at him in disbelief. My handling of the Westbrook account has increased their investment with us by 22% this year alone. The issue is not performance metrics but relationship management, said Vincent, speaking for the first time. We have evidence you have been cultivating an inappropriate personal relationship with Katherine Westbrook. Inappropriate. We occasionally meet for coffee to discuss business strategies. Brandon has been aware of this from the beginning. Brandon's expression hardened. What I was not aware of was your suggestion to Katherine that certain investments might be better handled outside our firm. My mind raced. I never suggested any such thing. I have always represented Lawrence Financial, with complete loyalty. We have testimony indicating otherwise, Michael interjected smoothly. Suddenly, the pieces fell into place. Michael had been planted to create this exact scenario, to provide evidence of whatever they needed to justify my removal. This was not about performance, or even about Katherine specifically. This was about eliminating me as a potential threat to Brandon's control. "This is absurd," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "I have 7 years of exemplary performance reviews. The Westbrook account has grown substantially under my management. Whatever testimony you claim to have is either fabricated or misinterpreted." Brandon pulled another document from his folder. "This is a termination agreement. We are prepared to offer 2 months severance provided you sign a non-compete clause and relinquish all client contacts. And if I refuse, then we terminate for cause with no severance and pursue legal action for breach of contract." Brandon's voice was cold. "Your choice, Heather." I looked around the table, searching for any sympathetic face. Finding none, I reached for my contract in the folder. "I believe I am still protected under the terms we agreed to," I said, flipping to the relevant page. What happened next remains seared in my memory. Brandon stood, took my contract from my hands, and walked to the shredder in the corner of the room. With deliberate slowness, he fed the pages into the machine, the whirring sound filling the silent room. "Your loyalty is worthless to us now," he said over the mechanical noise. "The truth is you were never partner material. We kept you around because Katherine liked you, but there are bigger opportunities that require someone with Michael's connections." The humiliation burned through me as the last page disappeared into the shredder. 7 years of work reduced to confetti in seconds. "You cannot simply shred a legal document and pretend it never existed," I said, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. Brandon smiled coldly. "Sue us if you want. Your signed copy against the company's revised version in our files. Who do you think wins that battle? A single employee against a firm with 4 lawyers on retainer." In that moment, I saw Brandon Lawrence for who he truly was, not a visionary leader, but a manipulative bully who disposed of people when they were no longer useful to him. "We will need your keycard and laptop before you leave," Vincent added, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. "Security will escort you to clear your desk." I stood slowly, dignity the only thing I had left. "You have made a serious mistake." Brandon actually laughed. "Save the empty threats, Heather. The agreement is there if you want the severance. Otherwise, security is waiting outside." I left the contract unsigned on the table and walked out without another word. The security guard, a kind man named Frank, who had always greeted me warmly each morning, now stood awkwardly by the elevator. "I am sorry about this, Miss Morrison," he whispered as we rode down together. Word had already spread. My colleagues averted their eyes as I cleared my personal items into a cardboard box. Only Natalie dared approach, slipping a note into my hand with a quick squeeze of support. The humiliation of being escorted from the building I had entered proudly for 7 years was almost unbearable. As Frank reluctantly took my keycard at the front entrance, I noticed Katherine Westbrook walking toward the building. Our eyes met briefly before I turned away, not wanting her to see me like this. The Uber ride home was a blur of shock and anger. Only when I finally closed my apartment door behind me did I allow myself to break down, tears of rage and betrayal flowing freely. When the storm finally passed, I opened Natalie's note. "Call me from a secure line. I have copies of everything." The game was not over yet. The next morning I woke with swollen eyes but a clear mind. Brandon had made a critical error in his arrogance. He had underestimated me. He assumed I would either take the severance and disappear or make futile threats without leverage. He never considered I might have a third option. I called Natalie from a coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment using a burner phone I purchased on the way. "I was worried you might not call," she said when she answered. "Are you okay?" "I have been better," I admitted. "What did you mean about having copies?" "Meet me at Riverside Park at noon. The bench near the boat basin. Do not bring your phone." The paranoia seemed excessive, but after yesterday's ambush, I was taking no chances. At precisely noon, I sat on the designated bench watching joggers and dog walkers enjoy the sunny day that contrasted sharply with my mood. Natalie arrived 10 minutes later, sitting beside me without a greeting. She passed me a manila envelope. "I have been making copies of concerning documents for months," she said quietly. "Not just yours. The firm has a pattern of pushing out employees when they get too successful or ask too many questions." Inside the envelope was a treasure trove. A copy of my original contract with all addendums, emails, between Brandon and Vincent, discussing ways to manage the Heather situation, and most importantly, evidence that Michael had misrepresented his qualifications on his resume. How did you get access to all this? Legal sees everything eventually, Natalie said, with a grim smile. And nobody pays attention to the quiet woman who organizes the files. I have been building this documentation for my own protection, but what they did to you crosses a line. Why are you risking your job to help me? She looked out over the water. Because 3 other women before you were pushed out the same way. Because I am tired of watching Brandon and his boys' club destroy careers. Because someday it might be me. I carefully examined the emails. They revealed Brandon had been planning my exit for months, ever since Katherine had mentioned potentially consolidating more of Westbrook's business with us, specifically requesting me as the primary advisor. Brandon was afraid you would take Katherine and Westbrook if you ever left, Natalie explained. He wanted to control the narrative by firing you first and poisoning the relationship. Can I legally use these documents? Some yes, some no. The emails were on company servers which employees have no expectation of privacy on according to the employee handbook. Your contract is your own property regardless of what Brandon theatrically shredded. The background check on Michael is public record information that anyone could verify. I felt a surge of hope for the first time since the board meeting. This is incredibly helpful, Natalie, but I still need a strategy. I have one more thing, she said, pulling a business card from her pocket. Eleanor Winters, best employment attorney in the city. She has been waiting for a case like yours to take on Brandon Lawrence. That afternoon I met with Eleanor in her downtown office. She was a formidable woman in her 60s with piercing eyes that missed nothing. So Brandon Lawrence shredded your contract in front of witnesses and declared your loyalty worthless, she summarized after I explained the situation. Then offered an insulting severance package conditional on you giving up all client relationships you developed. That is correct. She smiled for the first time. He really is as arrogant as they say. His theatrical display actually works in our favor. A contract does not cease to exist because one party destroys a copy. We spent 3 hours developing a strategy. I would need more evidence, particularly regarding Michael's misrepresentations and Brandon's true motivations. Most critically, I needed to speak with Katherine Westbrook before Brandon could fully poison that relationship. Do not contact her from any device Lawrence Financial ever had access to, Eleanor warned, and meet somewhere Brandon's golf buddies would never go. I remembered the business card Katherine had given me with her personal number. That evening I called from my new burner phone. Katherine Westbrook, she answered on the 3rd ring. Katherine, it is Heather Morrison. I need to speak with you urgently, but not over the phone. There was a pause. I heard what happened. Brandon told me you were terminated for sharing confidential information with competitors. My heart sank. He had already started the smear campaign. That is categorically false, I said firmly. I have never breached any confidentiality. I would like the opportunity to explain in person. Another pause. The community garden on Jackson Street. Tomorrow 7 a.m. I go there to think sometimes before work. No one from the financial world would ever be there at that hour. The next morning, in the peaceful surroundings of the community garden, I told Katherine everything. The plot to remove me the shredded contract, Brandon's fear that my relationship with her threatened his control. I always knew Brandon was ruthless in business, Katherine said when I finished. But this level of deception toward his own employee is disturbing. I believe he is afraid you would follow me if I ever left the firm. Katherine's expression was unreadable. And would I have reason to? I chose my words carefully. I have always represented Lawrence Financial with integrity. My priority has been your financial success, not my personal gain. Yet here you are meeting secretly with your biggest former client immediately after being fired. I felt a flash of panic. Had I misread the situation completely? Then Katherine smiled. Relax, Heather. I have been in business long enough to recognize when someone is being railroaded. Brandon called me personally yesterday to explain your sudden departure. His story had more holes than a golf course. Relief flooded through me. So, you do not believe I breached confidentiality? Of course not. But more importantly, I do not appreciate being lied to or manipulated. Brandon assumed I would simply accept whatever advisor he assigned to Westbrook as if our working relationship meant nothing. She pulled out her phone and showed me an email. This morning, Michael Donovan sent me this laughably basic overview of Westbrook's opportunities for growth. He misspelled my name twice and recommended strategies we specifically rejected last year. For the first time since the board meeting, I laughed. "What exactly are you planning?" Katherine asked, suddenly serious. "I am consulting with an attorney about wrongful termination. But beyond that, I am considering my options." Katherine studied me thoughtfully. "Have you considered starting your own advisory firm?" The question caught me off guard. I have the experience and client knowledge, but without capital or an existing client base. "You would need a significant client to establish credibility," Katherine finished for me, "someone willing to transfer their business to you immediately." Our eyes met in mutual understanding. "That would be a tremendous risk for such a client," I said carefully. "Sometimes the greatest opportunities come from others' mistakes," Katherine replied. "Brandon made a serious one when he underestimated both of us." Over the next week, I worked feverishly with Eleanor to build our case while secretly meeting with Katherine to discuss the possibility of starting my own firm. Natalie continued providing crucial documentation from inside Lawrence Financial, including evidence that Brandon had backdated documents to support their claims against me. Eleanor also discovered that the private equity group interested in investing in Lawrence Financial had specific requirements about client retention that made my close relationship with Westbrook problematic for Brandon's narrative. "He needed you gone before the deal closed," Eleanor explained. "Your success with Westbrook was actually working against you." We decided on a two-pronged approach. First, Eleanor would request a meeting with Brandon and the board to discuss settlement terms for my wrongful termination. Second, I would quietly file paperwork to establish Morrison Financial Advisors with Katherine Westbrook as my first and primary client. The timing had to be perfect. If Brandon discovered Katherine's intentions before our meeting, he would do everything in his power to prevent Westbrook from leaving. The loss of their biggest client would not only damage Lawrence Financial financially, but would destroy Brandon's reputation in the industry. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked Katherine during one of our planning sessions. "Westbrook represents a significant portion of your family's wealth." "My father trusted Brandon," she replied. "I trust you. Besides, this is not just about financial management anymore. This is about working with people who demonstrate integrity, even when it is difficult." The final piece fell into place when Eleanor obtained proof that Michael had fabricated portions of his employment history. This was particularly significant because Lawrence Financial had used Michael's credentials in marketing materials sent to clients, including Westbrook Industries, potentially constituting fraud. Everything was set for our confrontation. Eleanor scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m., giving no indication of our true intentions. The law offices of Winters and Associates would host, putting Brandon on unfamiliar territory. The night before the meeting, I barely slept, not from anxiety, but from a strange, calm certainty. Brandon had taught me many things over 7 years, though not the lessons he intended. He showed me that loyalty flows only one way with certain people, that some view relationships purely as transactions, that power unchecked by ethics becomes tyranny. Most importantly, he taught me that I was far stronger than he ever gave me credit for. The conference room at Winters and Associates exuded quiet power, with its understated elegance and views of the city skyline. I arrived an hour early to review our strategy with Eleanor one final time. "Remember," she cautioned, "let me do most of the talking. Your job is to remain calm regardless of what Brandon says or does. The facts are on our side." At precisely 9:55, the receptionist announced the arrival of Brandon Lawrence, accompanied by Vincent Parker and Lawrence Financial's attorney James Wilson. I recognized Wilson as a ruthless litigator with a reputation for aggressive tactics. Eleanor met them in the lobby personally, every inch the consummate professional. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Please follow me." They entered the conference room with the confident stride of men accustomed to dominating every space they occupied. That confidence faltered slightly when they saw me sitting calmly at the table. "I was not informed Miss Morrison would be present," Wilson said immediately. "My client has every right to attend a meeting regarding her wrongful termination," Eleanor replied smoothly. "Please have a seat." Brandon's eyes locked with mine briefly before he took his place opposite me. His expression revealed nothing, but I knew him well enough to recognize the subtle tightening of his jaw that indicated annoyance. "Let me be clear from the outset," Wilson began once everyone was seated. "Lawrence Financial terminated Miss Morrison for cause, specifically breach of contract regarding client confidentiality and solicitation. Any claims of wrongful termination are without merit." Eleanor smiled pleasantly. That is an interesting position considering the theatrical destruction of my client's contract by Mr. Lawrence himself witnessed by the entire board. A copy of the contract remains in company files, Wilson countered. The document Mr. Lawrence disposed of was merely a duplicate. How fortunate that we have our own copy, Eleanor said, sliding a folder across the table. The original signed by both parties, with all addendums intact. You will note the provisions regarding termination procedures which were clearly violated. Wilson examined the document carefully while Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This proves nothing, Wilson said finally. The termination was still for cause. Based on fabricated allegations, Eleanor replied. We have evidence that Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Parker conspired to remove Miss Morrison specifically to prevent her from potentially taking the Westbrook account if she ever left the firm. She produced copies of the emails Natalie had provided, watching as Wilson's expression darkened upon reading them. These were obtained illegally from company servers, he protested. They were provided by a current employee with legitimate access documenting what they reasonably believed to be unlawful discrimination and contract violations, Eleanor corrected. We have additional evidence regarding Mr. Michael Donovan's misrepresented credentials, which were used in official communications with clients. Brandon finally broke his silence. This is absurd. Heather was terminated because she was secretly planning to poach Westbrook Industries. We had reliable information. From Mr. Donovan, I presume I asked, speaking for the first time. The same Mr. Donovan, who claimed to have been senior portfolio manager at Meridian Capital for 5 years, when in fact he was terminated after 2 years for ethical violations. Brandon's face paled slightly. Whatever issues might exist with Michael's background check have nothing to do with your termination. They speak directly to the credibility of the person whose testimony you used to justify my firing, I replied calmly, and to the overall pattern of deception. The tension in the room was palpable, as Wilson conferred quietly with Brandon and Vincent. I remained outwardly composed, though my heart was racing. What exactly are you seeking here? Wilson finally asked Eleanor. If this is about severance, we might be willing to improve the original offer to 3 months provided Miss Morrison signs the non-compete clause. Eleanor glanced at her watch. Actually, the non-compete is no longer on the table. In fact, we are here primarily to inform you of certain developments rather than to negotiate. On cue, her assistant entered with another folder which Eleanor placed before her without opening. Mr. Lawrence, you terminated my client because you feared she might one day leave and take Westbrook Industries with her, Eleanor said. In doing so, you created the very situation you were trying to prevent. Brandon's expression darkened. What are you talking about? Katherine Westbrook was quite disturbed to learn how Lawrence Financial treats its top performers, I said, maintaining direct eye contact with Brandon, particularly those who have generated millions in revenue for the firm. Katherine would never leave Lawrence Financial, Brandon scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Our relationship goes back 20 years to her father. Eleanor opened the folder and removed a single sheet of paper which she slid across the table. This was executed yesterday afternoon. The document was a client agreement between Westbrook Industries and Morrison Financial Advisors, transferring all accounts and investments previously managed by Lawrence Financial, effective immediately. Brandon stared at the paper in disbelief, his face draining of color. Vincent grabbed it from him, eyes widening as he read. This is client theft, Wilson exclaimed. We will sue for tortious interference. Actually came a new voice from the doorway. It was entirely my decision. Katherine Westbrook stood there, elegant in a tailored suit flanked by her company's legal counsel. Katherine, Brandon stammered, rising quickly. There has been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was my belief that Lawrence Financial operated with integrity, Katherine replied coolly. You lied to me about Heather's termination, presented an unqualified advisor as an expert, and assumed I would simply accept whatever changes you imposed on our business relationship. We have worked with your family for 2 decades, Brandon protested. One disgruntled employee should not destroy that legacy. Katherine's expression remained impassive. My father valued loyalty, Brandon, not just from others to him, but his loyalty to those who served him well. He would be disappointed to see how quickly you discarded someone who helped grow our account by double digits year after year. She turned to me with a warm smile. Heather's new firm better represents the values Westbrook Industries prioritizes in our financial partners. Brandon's shock was rapidly transforming into anger. This is not over. We will challenge this transfer. The contract with Lawrence Financial has specific terms about account transitions, which we have fully complied with, Catherine's attorney interjected. The termination fee has already been wired to Lawrence Financial's account. All legal requirements have been satisfied. Eleanor produced another document, now regarding Miss Morrison's wrongful termination. We are prepared to settle under the following terms: full severance of 6 months' salary retraction of all defamatory statements and a mutual non-disparagement agreement. Wilson leaned over to whisper urgently in Brandon's ear, but he was beyond reason. You think you have won, he snarled at me. But this industry is smaller than you know. One client will not sustain a new firm. I will make sure everyone knows you cannot be trusted. I met his gaze steadily. The only thing this industry will know is that you fired your most successful advisor out of fear and insecurity, then lost your biggest client as a result. Is that really the narrative you want circulating among your remaining clients, and that private equity group you are courting? The mention of the private equity deal struck home. Brandon visibly flinched, suddenly aware of the broader implications. The Westbrook account represented nearly 30% of Lawrence Financial's revenue. Its loss would not only damage the firm financially, but could potentially derail the investment deal he had been pursuing. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Wilson suggested to Brandon, clearly concerned by his client's deteriorating composure. Brandon ignored him, his attention fixed on me. What do you really want, Heather, to destroy everything I have built? I wanted to be valued for my contributions, I replied honestly. I wanted the partnership I earned. When you made that impossible, I simply created a new path forward. Katherine stepped fully into the room. The financial advisory world is changing, Brandon. Clients like Westbrook want more than just traditional money management. We want advisors who are innovative, ethical, and personally invested in our success. Heather represents that future. You remain stuck in the past. The truth of her words hung in the air. Brandon's face reflected the dawning realization that his actions had triggered this cascade of consequences. Vincent looked shell-shocked, while Wilson was frantically making notes, likely already calculating how to minimize the damage. Eleanor broke the heavy silence. I suggest we take a 30-minute recess for everyone to consider their positions. When we reconvene, I hope we can resolve Miss Morrison's termination claims amicably, without the need for protracted litigation that would only bring further unwanted attention to this situation. As Brandon and his team filed out, Katherine approached me. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of vindication and sadness. I never wanted it to end this way with Lawrence Financial. Some endings are really beginnings in disguise, she replied. Speaking of which, we should discuss the Barrett manufacturing proposal this week. They have been watching Westbrook's results and expressed interest in similar advisory services. Eleanor overheard and smiled. Perhaps we should discuss expanding Morrison Financial Advisors sooner rather than later. For the first time in weeks, I laughed with genuine joy. The path ahead would be challenging, but it was mine to define, free from Brandon's manipulation and constraints. When Brandon returned to the conference room 30 minutes later, the fight had left him. He signed Eleanor's settlement agreement with minimal negotiation, his earlier bravado replaced by resigned pragmatism. As we concluded the meeting, I offered my hand to him, surprising everyone, including myself. I learned a great deal from you over 7 years, Brandon. Not all of it was what you intended to teach. He hesitated before briefly shaking my hand. You will find running your own firm harder than you expect. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but at least I will succeed or fail on my own terms. As he turned to leave, I could not resist one final comment. By the way, Katherine mentioned that Thomas Westbrook always considered you family. It is a shame you did not extend the same loyalty to your own people. The words hit their mark. Brandon paused momentarily, shoulders stiffening, before walking out without looking back. News travels fast in the financial world. By the end of the week, the story of how Brandon Lawrence had lost Westbrook Industries after firing the advisor who managed the account was circulating throughout the industry. The details grew more dramatic with each retelling, though the essential truth remained consistent. Lawrence Financial had self-destructed through arrogance and mismanagement. My phone began ringing constantly with calls from former colleagues, industry connections, and even competing firms offering partnerships. I declined them all, focused entirely on establishing Morrison Financial Advisors as a credible independent firm with Katherine's support. Natalie called me 10 days after the confrontation meeting. You might want to see this, she said, emailing me an internal memo from Lawrence Financial. The document announced a strategic reorganization of the firm's leadership team. Brandon remained CEO, but a new chief operating officer was replacing Vincent, and Michael Donovan had been reassigned to client development in regional markets, a polite way of removing him from any significant accounts. Most surprisingly, the memo announced the promotion of 2 women to senior partnership positions, the first in the firm's history. Brandon is in damage control mode, Natalie explained. The private equity group delayed their investment pending a review of client retention metrics and management practices. 3 other significant clients have requested meetings to review their relationship with the firm. Are they asking about me? I asked, curious, despite myself. Not directly, but people are connecting the dots. Brandon has strictly forbidden anyone from mentioning your name or Westbrook Industries in client meetings. How are things there day to day? Natalie sighed. Tense. Brandon alternates between forced optimism in public and closed-door rages. The board is asking uncomfortable questions about how the Westbrook situation was handled. The new COO is reviewing all client relationship management protocols. And what about you? Are you okay? I have been interviewing elsewhere, she admitted. The atmosphere has become toxic for anyone perceived as being friendly with you. I might have a position for a legal compliance officer at a growing financial advisory firm, I said carefully. The pay might not match Lawrence Financial initially, but the growth potential is significant. Her laugh conveyed both surprise and relief. Are you serious? Completely. Morrison Financial Advisors needs people I can trust. Think about it, and let me know. 2 weeks later, Natalie became my firm's second employee. By then I had already secured a small office space and begun the process of building the infrastructure needed to support Westbrook's complex financial needs. Katherine proved to be not just a client, but a powerful advocate. She introduced me to several other business owners in her network, 3 of whom transferred portions of their portfolios to my management within the first month. The most unexpected development came 6 weeks after launching my firm. I received an email from Thomas Westbrook himself, Katherine's father, requesting a meeting at his home. Though semi-retired, he remained a legendary figure in the business community, and his opinion still carried enormous weight. His sprawling estate reflected old money and understated elegance. Katherine met me at the door. Dad has been following everything that happened, she explained as she led me to his study. He wanted to meet you personally. Thomas Westbrook was in his 70s, physically frail, but with eyes that remained sharp and assessing. He gestured for me to sit in the leather chair across from him. So you are the young woman who outmaneuvered Brandon Lawrence, he said without preamble. That was not my primary objective, sir, I replied honestly. He smiled slightly. No, I expect it was not, but it was the result nonetheless. Tell me why I should trust my daughter's judgment in moving our family's financial business to a firm that did not exist 2 months ago. For the next hour, I outlined my vision for Morrison Financial Advisors, emphasizing personalized service, transparent fee structures, and innovative investment strategies that balanced growth with social responsibility, knowing from Katherine that the latter was particularly important to the Westbrook legacy. Thomas listened intently, interrupting occasionally with incisive questions that revealed his still formidable understanding of financial markets. When I finished, he sat in silence for several moments. Brandon was like a son to me once, he finally said. I gave him his start when no one else would take a chance on him. Over time, I watched him build Lawrence Financial into a respectable firm, but also saw how success changed him. The hunger that once drove him to excel became a fear of losing what he had gained. He leaned forward. The true measure of success is not what you accumulate, Miss Morrison, but what you create that outlasts you. Brandon forgot that lesson. I hope never to make the same mistake, I said sincerely. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Katherine tells me you declined acquisition offers from several larger firms. I did. Building something meaningful requires independence and the freedom to make decisions based on client needs rather than quarterly profit targets. A perspective Brandon once shared ironically. Thomas smiled wryly. I have decided to transfer the remainder of my personal accounts to your management as well. Not just because of Katherine's recommendation, but because you demonstrated something rare in this industry, the courage to stand on principle, even at great personal risk. His endorsement proved to be a turning point. Within 6 months, Morrison Financial Advisors had grown to a team of 7 professionals managing over $200 million in assets. We specialized in family-owned businesses and emphasized long-term relationships over transactional interactions. Lawrence Financial, meanwhile, was struggling. The private equity deal eventually went through, but at terms far less favorable than Brandon had originally negotiated. 3 senior partners left to join competitors, taking significant clients with them. Industry analysts began questioning whether the firm had lost its competitive edge. Brandon made one attempt to reach out, sending an email suggesting we discuss potential collaboration opportunities. I politely declined, recognizing it as a thinly veiled attempt to regain access to the Westbrook relationship. 9 months after launching my firm, I received an Industry Leadership Award for innovation in client relationship management. The irony was not lost on me that I was being recognized for the very qualities Brandon had perceived as threatening. At the award ceremony, I spotted Vincent Parker watching from the back of the room. He approached me during the reception afterward. "Congratulations," he said, the words seemingly difficult for him to pronounce. "You have done well for yourself." "Thank you, Vincent. How are things at Lawrence Financial?" He glanced around before answering. "Brandon is stepping down as CEO next month. The board decided new leadership was needed to revitalize the firm's direction. I will be leaving as well." "I am sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely surprised by the news. Vincent's laugh was without humor. "No, you are not. But it does not matter now. For what it is worth, I told Brandon firing you was a mistake from the beginning. Not that he listened." As he walked away, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. The vindication I had once craved no longer seemed important. I had built something valuable from the ashes of betrayal, something that reflected my own values rather than someone else's vision. That evening, Katherine called to congratulate me on the award. "You know what today is, right?" she asked. I had to think for a moment. 1 year since Brandon shredded my contract. 1 year since he inadvertently launched Morrison Financial Advisors, she corrected. "Sometimes I think we should send him a thank you note." We both laughed. The past hurt transformed into something approaching gratitude for the opportunity it had ultimately created. 2 years after the contract shredding incident, Morrison Financial Advisors had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We now occupied the entire 10th floor of an office building downtown with a team of 23 professionals, managing over $700 million in assets. Our client retention rate stood at 98%, well above the industry average, and we had been featured in several financial publications as a model of the new generation of advisory firms. The journey had not been without challenges. Building proper infrastructure, navigating regulatory requirements, and managing the expectations of increasingly diverse clients all tested my leadership abilities. There were nights I questioned my decision to strike out on my own, moments when the security of my former position seemed appealing compared to the constant demands of entrepreneurship. But with each challenge overcome, my confidence grew. The firm's success validated the approach I had always believed in, that genuine care for clients' well-being, combined with transparent communication and innovative thinking, could create more value than the traditional transaction-focused model. Brandon Lawrence had indeed left Lawrence Financial, though industry rumors suggested the departure was less voluntary than officially portrayed. The firm itself had been acquired by a larger financial services conglomerate, its name and distinct identity gradually disappearing into the corporate parent. I occasionally ran into former colleagues at industry events. Some had thrived in the new corporate structure. Others had moved on to different firms or even different industries. Most seemed genuinely happy for my success, even those who had remained silent during my dramatic exit. On the 2nd anniversary of founding Morrison Financial Advisors, I invited the entire team and key clients to a celebration at an upscale restaurant. Katherine and Thomas Westbrook attended as guests of honor, along with several other founding clients who had taken a chance on a new firm with an unproven track record. During dinner, Thomas asked for everyone's attention and raised his glass. 2 years ago, a young woman with extraordinary talent was told her loyalty was worthless. Today, we celebrate how wrong that assessment was. Heather built this firm on the principle that loyalty runs both ways between advisors and clients. The results speak for themselves. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Katherine pulled me aside. "Have you seen the industry newsletter today?" I shook my head. "I've been too busy with preparations for tonight." She showed me her tablet open to an article announcing that Brandon Lawrence had launched a new boutique advisory firm focused on relationship-driven wealth management. The irony was almost too perfect. "Life has a strange way of coming full circle," Katherine observed. Do you think he learned anything from what happened? I considered the question seriously. I hope so. Despite everything, Brandon was a talented advisor who lost his way. Perhaps starting over will help him rediscover what drew him to this work in the first place. Very gracious of you, Katherine said, with a raised eyebrow. I am not sure I could be so forgiving. It is not about forgiveness so much as perspective, I explained. The truth is, I would not be where I am today if Brandon had not made the choices he did. His betrayal forced me to reevaluate everything and take risks I might have avoided otherwise. The most valuable lessons I learned through this journey were not about finance or business strategy, but about human nature and my own resilience. First, true loyalty cannot be demanded or purchased, only earned through consistent action and mutual respect. Brandon viewed loyalty as a one-way obligation owed to him, never recognizing that his own actions were steadily eroding the foundation of trust his relationships were built upon. Second, professional value is not determined by a single employer's assessment. Brandon believed he could define my worth through his position of authority, never imagining that the very qualities he sought to suppress would prove valuable to others. Third, adversity reveals character in ways comfort never can. The crisis of being publicly humiliated and terminated tested not just my professional abilities, but my ethical boundaries. I had opportunities for petty revenge that I chose not to take, focusing instead on building something positive. Fourth, relationships matter more than transactions. The connections I had developed with Katherine and others survived because they were built on genuine care and mutual benefit, not merely on what each party could extract from the other. Finally, I learned that sometimes the most painful endings clear the path for better beginnings. Had I remained at Lawrence Financial, I might have eventually made partner, but I would have been confined within a culture that did not align with my values. As the evening came to a close, Natalie approached me with a champagne flute. Remember when you called me from that burner phone sounding completely shell-shocked? Look at us now. I smiled, remembering how desperate that time had felt. I was just thinking about how strangely grateful I am for everything that happened, even the awful parts. To necessary endings, she said, raising her glass. And better beginnings, I added, clinking my glass against hers. The firm continued to grow in the years that followed. We expanded into new service areas, opened offices in 3 additional cities, and even acquired 2 smaller advisory firms whose founders were approaching retirement. Brandon's new venture reportedly struggled to gain traction, eventually merging with another small firm to remain viable. We never spoke directly again, though I heard through industry channels that he had begun mentoring younger advisors, perhaps finding meaning in passing on his considerable knowledge rather than hoarding power. 5 years after the contract shredding, I received an unexpected email from Vincent Parker. He was teaching finance at a local university and asked if I would consider speaking to his students about entrepreneurship in the financial services industry. Your story has valuable lessons they should hear, he wrote, about both what to do and what not to do in building a career. I agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to help shape the next generation of financial professionals. During my presentation, I shared the story of how Morrison Financial Advisors began not shying away from the painful parts but emphasizing the constructive lessons. Afterward, Vincent thanked me with surprising sincerity. You built something remarkable from a situation most people would have been destroyed by. My students needed to hear that resilience matters more than initial advantages. We all have different paths, I replied. Yours led to teaching, which clearly suits you. He nodded thoughtfully. I have found I enjoy helping others succeed more than I enjoyed succeeding at their expense. Wish I had learned that lesson earlier. The journey from that devastating boardroom moment to the present had transformed not just my career, but my understanding of success itself. What Brandon intended as an ending became the catalyst for something far more meaningful than I could have achieved within the constraints of his organization. If you are facing your own moment of betrayal or professional devastation, remember that what matters most is not what happens to you, but how you respond. Your greatest setbacks often contain the seeds of your most significant growth. The contract someone else shreds might just be the universe's way of pushing you toward the contract you were meant to write for yourself. I would love to hear about times when a professional setback ultimately led to something better in your life. Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life lessons from the business world. Share with someone who might need encouragement after facing their own professional betrayal. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most powerful response to someone underestimating you is simply proving them wrong.